Nice.
Yeah.
So they just conceded at the end. That was a tough matchup.
Currently, our title on Twitch is spectating a Magic tournament as a high skill player explains what's going on.
I'm glad that you think that I'm high skill, John. That makes me happy.
Dude, I've put what I would consider above average amount of time into learning the game, and I can barely follow along.
So the archetype that I am playing is, you know what? Why don't I just take you through the deck list?
Why don't I do an intro first and then you do that?
Yeah, sure.
Boom! I hate you so much.
Perfect.
Welcome everybody, Strategy Engineer, and I'm here with a buddy of mine, a crazy Eskimo. He's taught me a lot of things, got me into the league, got me into Hearthstone, and got me into Magic. But he's gonna be the first guy to be hosting a Pros Explain. So he's gonna be playing a Magic match, and Magic the Gathering online, and he's gonna explain to me and me via YouTube, explain to you what's going on. So, how's it going?
Hey, John. Thank you very much for inviting me. I know that it kind of just happened out of fruition, but I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, I'm all yours. This process takes up both my monitors and all my CPU, so I can't do anything else.
All right. Why don't I change my window over? Let me move Discord to my other monitor. And I will share my screen. Okay. So, what we have going on here is a Pioneer tournament. It is the format that I have turned to over the past year. I heard it could be pretty fun. I
And
played
Pioneer's the
Paper Man
newest cards. Is that what that is?
essentially. So, Pioneer is a format that everything from Return to Ravnica onward is legal. And so, Return to Ravnica was the very first set that I played Magic with.
Oh,
So
cool.
for me, it's all the cards that I have ever played with in that were in standard at some point.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yes. So any cards that get released direct to modern, direct to legacy, uh, I are not legal in this particular format. But if it's a regular standard set, you are able to play it.
Technically, I play Vintage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is
and
that your rat deck?
it's all my decks because Vintage means that everything's legal except for like 6 cards.
Yeah. Or they're just restricted, so you can
Yeah.
only have one copy. Yeah, MTGO has a vintage cube that is a pretty fun format too. So
Ironically, the Rat deck is my only modern deck. Okay, so
we love to see it.
We're running a Pioneer deck.
Yeah, let me make these a little larger, and then we'll go through what the whole point of this particular deck is and what it's trying to do.
Okay.
So this archetype is called Golgari Rock. So Golgari is just the colors of the deck. As most people may know, if you're watching Magic content, there are 5 different colors in Magic. So a card such as this one, Damping Sphere, has a little 2 on it. This is a colorless card since there's no colors in the mana cost. If there are colors in the cost, 99% of the time, that's the colors of the card. So my deck relies on black and green cards. My green cards are typically my creature threats, and my black cards are cards that are removing other people's threats. And my
Okay.
land base, which is here, is going to support those different colors. For an example, this Woodland Cemetery taps for either black mana or green mana if it's on the battlefield.
So I guess my biggest question for you is, what is your win condition, and what are we looking for to see early and mid game to know that we're approaching it?
Good question. So this is the deck minus the lands, everything here. And the goal of the deck is to kind of stabilize against your opponent and then win with some of your bigger threats. So this deck is trying to win off of something such as Questing Beast, which is a 4/4 power toughness creature that has vigilance, death touch, and haste.
Oh
It's very
wow.
strong.
Yeah.
Yes, and it has a whole other gigantic box of text too. So when it hits people, it also deals damage to their planeswalkers, and it also can't be blocked by power 2 or less. It also says combat damage can't be prevented, but that's
Yeah.
rarely ever important.
And I'm gonna try and like assume a certain level of intelligence of everybody, and assume vigilance, death touch, haste, and everything's understood. But I would like to understand more about a planeswalker.
So that is my other win condition of the deck.
Oh,
Interesting
perfect.
segue that you would do that. So planeswalkers are permanents that sit on the battlefield that have different abilities associated with them. So some of them have a static ability, which is what Vivian has here. So the card text that is above the +1/-2 section is an ability that Vivian has as long as she is on the battlefield. So when she's here, I can look at the top card of my library, and if it's a creature card, I can play that card from the top. On the bottom right of the card is the starting loyalty of your planeswalker. So if your planeswalker drops to 0 or below loyalty, then they will be put into the graveyard since they're no longer loyal to you. While they have loyalty, once per turn, you can choose on your turn, I should say. You can choose to use one of their abilities as long as you have enough loyalty to activate it. So
That's
if
awesome.
Vivian was at 1, for example, I would not be able to use her -2 ability.
Okay.
But more often than not, I'm going to be trying to use her plus ability anyway, since the whole point of her is I can try to take out everyone else's stuff with my removal cards while I just make an army of 3/3 beasts.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
So,
Planeswalkers are quite powerful.
so I guess the terminology that's local to around here would be and I'm curious if it's universal terms. Your win condition would be aggro, since you're just trying to hit them in the face as much as possible, and near
So
the
this is
end.
actually a mid-range deck.
A mid
As since
range.
you brought up
Okay.
the point,
Yeah.
there are a few different types of decks. There are four main types of decks that you want to think about when you're thinking of what kind of win condition you're trying to perpetuate. The first
Okay.
one is an aggro deck. Those decks are typically involving the color red somewhere in their list. Uh, but I mean, sometimes like a white deck can do it. Um,
Okay.
uh,
So a burn
but
deck would be an aggro deck.
a burn deck is a great example of an aggro deck. They are trying to rush down your life total as fast as possible. And their entire win condition is I am going to kill you so fast that you are not going to be able to play things like Vivian or Questing Beast.
See, that's a good thing, because I actually genuinely thought that aggro deck and burn deck were separate entities, not
Yeah, I
subsets
mean,
of the other.
they can be. But yes, a burn deck is definitely a subset of an aggro deck. However, a burn deck could be a subset of a different type, which would be a combo deck. And that is all reliant on assembling different cards together in your hand or in your
Okay.
graveyard or wherever you need them in order to pull off your win condition.
Gotcha.
So a deck like Storm in Modern relies on Grape Shot in order to be able to win. So you could consider it as kind of a burn deck since they're playing a spell that's going to deal a lot of damage to your face. However, instead of being an aggro deck, they are a combo deck since they're reliant on playing a lot of cards first and then playing Grape Shot.
Okay. Gotcha.
The last two are mid range and control. I'm a mid range deck where I'm trying to use some removal to get rid of my opponent's early threats. Cards such as like Fatal Push, will kill creatures. Abrupt Decay, Assassin's Trophy will remove permanents. And then my creatures are mid-sized creatures. So like 4/3 is a decent body. or I have cards like Tireless Tracker that grow larger. Scavenging Ooze gains life and grows larger. But my top end stops at 5,
Okay.
and I'm just trying to kind of put together a board of creatures versus um, doing something like remove for the whole game and then win based off of something like planeswalkers or extremely large creatures or kind of one big awesome spell, and that's a control decks mentality.
And uh, I currently play a control deck, um, but what would a swarm deck fall under?
A swarm deck could be one of two things. You're generally generating a lot of tokens with that deck, and it would either be an aggro deck or a mid range deck, depending on what you're when you're trying to actually pull off that swarm. So if
Okay.
you're trying to do it at the very start, where you're playing a 1/1 on turn one and maybe two on turn two, and then on turn three, you're trying to buff them up, for example, that would be an aggro deck. If you're trying to assemble a lot of tokens over time and just constantly generating value, that would be a mid range deck.
Okay, so that's what my modern swarm deck would be, is a mid range deck. So okay, so I have to compare this mid range to my swarm deck and see how much better it is than that.
Yeah, you could think about that as a consideration. One other important note to keep in mind is that uh, different formats will have different power levels because of the cards available to them. So, a format like Modern, it's very hard to compare a Pioneer deck to a Modern deck because all the cards that are legal in Pioneer are legal in Modern, but not vice versa. Modern goes back to, I think, 7th edition. Uh,
Okay,
and has a lot of other options that you would be able to include that you cannot include in a Pioneer deck.
we'll have to set it up on tabletop sometime and run the two decks against each other.
Yeah, sure. I have a lot of ideas for decks, so I'm hoping that this one turns out okay. Uh,
Okay.
but I mean, as you can see, I have played a large variety of Pioneer decks on MTGO, and some of them are more successful than others. Let's just say.
So if I understand it, our goal is to win mid range game, with our questing beasts and our planeswalkers, and a successful early game is going to look like a control game with removal of high level threats and getting some minions on the board for protection.
Yeah, it could even just be any threat. At the start of the game, I am just looking to gain any sort of tempo advantage that over my opponent that I can. And then once I have that tempo advantage, I will be able to keep one of my creatures on board while making sure that they have zero if possible.
I think the only other thing I need to understand before we can jump into a game is what is it defined as a mid-range part of the game? What turn, or is that just a fluctuating thing? How is that determined? Is it by health value?
So I would say that an aggro deck stops getting aggro around turn 5. Once you're hitting turn 5, you're kind of turning the corner from being an aggressive strategy to a mid-range strategy.
Okay.
Of I have survived this long, now I should, in theory, be able to get there.
Yeah,
But as you may
I've learned with
go,
burn that if I make it to turn 8, then I've lost.
yes. So and as a burn player yourself, um, just just because you're playing after turn 5 as an aggro deck doesn't mean you've lost. Your opponent may be at a very low life total. They may be holding a lot of lands in hand, but as the longer the game goes on, the lower your probability is that you're going to win.
Yeah.
A mid range deck is more of a bell curve, so
Okay.
uh, you maximize your chances of winning in the middle of a game, and then as the game goes on and on, maybe like turn 10, turn 12, turn 14, that's when a control deck is really going to take over, and you will not be able to come back.
Okay, I understand. So, perfect. Well, with that in mind, I would like to welcome our one viewer and laugh when I realize it's just you.
It's actually not me. So,
Hi, welcome viewer. Feel free to chat and ask questions. I'll make sure to communicate them.
the
Um,
last thing I'll touch on
yeah, go
is
for it.
the sideboard. So, while you're playing, after the first match, so you're trying to optimize your deck against most decks that you can for your first matchup, and then once you play that first game, you'll have the opportunity to switch cards out of your deck for cards in your sideboard, and then the cards that I have put in here are uh, what is called like teched against certain matchups. So a Carnage Tyrant, for example, is a great win condition against a controlled deck. So it can't
Okay.
be countered. It's a big trample uh, dude, and so this is hopefully how I'm going to beat a control deck in the mid range game. And then I have a variety of other more technical options against other decks that I
So,
can go over if
so
we
the
run
first
into
thing
that.
we're gonna do when we get in the game is try and identify what type of deck we're against.
Exactly. The first thing that will happen is someone will get to go first, and then as they play their first cards, we'll have an idea of what type of deck we're up against and how we should be using our cards to generate the best advantage possible.
Sounds like a plan. Let's do this.
Let's do this.
Hey everybody, this is Strategy Engineer. If you like this video and want to support me in making more, be sure to subscribe by hitting the button in the middle. If you want to see similar content, click to the left, and for the whole playlist, click to the right. I'm still learning to edit and find my style, so any feedback, like, dislike, or comment helps a lot. Till next time, peace.
Oh, you're